Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Condo Solutions. Every Monday morning, rain or shine, we're here to talk about things that affect you and your condo or your HOA, some of the things that you might be aware of or not aware of, some of the things that you might be dealing with. We're here to help you with those things. You can call. It is a call-in show. It's a community service program. 220-9788, 220-WSTU is the number in the studio. If you've got a question or want to follow up or call, we'll be happy to get your question on the air. As we always say, you don't have to give us your association. We prefer you don't have it because then some people tune out thinking it doesn't apply to them. So, but we do need a name, any name. Give us a neighbor's name, give us your name, give us. You could be me if you want. I don't care. We just have to have somebody to call you. But we are. But we will get you on. We'll try to answer your question. As we always say, too, we will give you the best answer we can. But as we mentioned, it's what we call a radio answer, which means that we don't have your documents. So we don't know for sure if it's applicable specifically to your association because your documents could say something different. But we will give you an answer based on your interpretation of the documents and general understanding of how the law takes place in a certain area and some of the factors there. We do try to talk a little broader than your maybe specific problem, so bear with us because we're trying to hit some of the ancillary things that maybe some people aren't. Maybe some people have a little bit different problems, so we're there to try to help with that. So that's pretty much the ground rules. Other than that, my name is Mark Brechbill. I'm a CPA and a community association manager, and also have a company that my son is involved with, which is C&M Property Management, which is also, he's a licensed property manager and is in the day-to-day field of property management. So that's my background. And of course, all of you know, because that's the reason you listen to us every Monday morning from 9 to 10 o'clock. Peter Mullengarden is our attorney with the show. He's been with us since the beginning, which has been a gazillion years. And we've been doing this thing. Not quite as long as WSTU's been around because they're very, 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 very old, as many of you people know. But a long, long time. Peter and I think have been doing the show for 17 or so years, somewhere in that range. And been here, and as Peter has been a tremendous resource to the community to get the word out there. And those that are regular listeners know that Peter is a good attorney in this area, knows a ton of law and what comes into play here and just does an exceptional job. So if you ever do need an attorney, you need to give Peter a call because he's the guy that can get it done for you. But otherwise, we're going to try to do the best we can and get it going. So good morning, Peter. How you doing?
Good, Mark. Good. How are you?
Good. No coronavirus yet this morning?
I hope not.
No. You know, I was kind of encouraged because based on that test out in Santa Clara, it appears that maybe most of us have already had it and we just didn't even know about it. It's there was, I think they were saying something like 80% or 85% of the people out there had the antibody, but had it, but had never even realized they had it. And so it was kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of New York once they get the testing out of New York and what happens up there. And that'll give us a lot of guidance because we are dealing with some issues coming up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But we do have our first caller this morning, so we'll get right to him. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
You
Morning.
folks have certainly had some new ground to cover the last several weeks. It's been interesting listening.
Thanks.
My question,
Thank you.
Peter, my question is for you, I guess. When the executive board of a...
I mean, it's kind of gray. I guess I would probably err on the side of saying it does not extend to that.
Okay.
Me being personnel more like the employees of the association or the employees of the management company, as opposed to interviewing a professional. That's just, again, there's really no cases on it I'm aware of specifically. I haven't researched it, to be honest, recently. But I don't think it would extend to that. I mean, typically I advise my clients, when they do those kind of interviews, to do it with less than a quorum of board members.
Yeah, I think that, and Peter, see if you agree. I think, Jim, that part of the law is there to protect the employee, not to protect the association, not to let the association hide behind it.
Correct.
It's there to protect the employee. And it's designed to employees' medical situations. It would apply to some sort of potentially sanction or some sort of
any kind of discipline, suspension,
any of that,
salary negotiation. I mean, Mark, it is pretty broad. It does say personnel issues.
Right.
So
but
I don't think it would extend to. I don't think it would extend to interviewing a professional being hired, whether it's an accountant, an attorney, or something.
No, unless you were hiring them internally. Right,
as an employee,
right? Or if and I think it might extend to the situation where,
really happen.
Right, but it might extend to the situation where you have an independent contractor who's under a corporate umbrella. Maybe it's one person that owns a property management company, just individually himself or herself. And if you've got an in-house property manager, so to speak, and you're hiring that in-house property manager, even if it's in a LLC type situation or an entity, I think there might be.
I could see it there.
It might apply a little broader there, but otherwise, if you're just interviewing, if you're just wanting to talk to your CPA or your attorney, now CPAs do have in the state of Florida, we have CPA client privilege. So if it was something that was significant from that standpoint, there would be the possibility.
And it's also true. You're right. I mean, if you're interviewing an attorney and during that interview you're seeking legal advice on a litigation matter or something, I would probably close it down because of the attorney-client privilege, not because of the personnel issue.
Exactly.
Scope of the discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I totally understand. I asked the question because I basically felt that was the answer, but I wanted to know, since we did discuss it a couple of years ago, if there'd been any further legal opinions or case law on it. But you're interpreting it now, and I always have, really in the traditional sense of personnel, meaning employee relations.
Yeah, I think, Jim, what's opened up a little bit, and I'm glad you asked the question because and like we say, we usually talk a little broader, but it's a good question because one of the issues that's coming up right now is issues for associations relative to what they should or shouldn't disclose of a employee or a unit owner that has the coronavirus or has contracted the coronavirus. And there are some issues there as to where health privacy issues that could also impact employees. You could be talking to employees about potentially layoffs or quarantining and sending them out because of a potential health issue. And you might close out a situation in that. I've got a situation where, as an auditor, we have a client that they're a nursing home, and so they're very concerned about who goes in and who goes out and those kind of things. And so we've had to and they've talked to us about specific things, and trying to get to a situation where with our own personnel, how we're going to handle our audit, because normally we do have to spend some time on site. And so there's issues like that I could understand would be in a closed session that even with a CPA firm, for example, or your attorney, if you've got concerns about your people and their age and the potential of contracting some sort of virus, you might be concerned about the professionals that are dealing with you, and they might not want to disclose that in a public situation because of health issues. If one of their people has had the coronavirus, they may not want to come out and say that in a public meeting because it may cause problems for them, and it may invade the privacy of the person that had it. So I think there's some things there that it's really we are now having to deal with. It is a little different, and because of these emergency powers issues, I still don't think the emergency powers will allow them to do would allow them to go into a closed session and shut down transparency. But there is some they have some provisions under the emergency powers that they could take action as well.
You raising that this broadening the topic is appropriate because what are your collective opinions about, or guesses, I guess, about employee relations in a multi-employee situation where the employer knows one person has tested positive for the virus, and can or cannot advise the other employees, or can or cannot advise that employee without, like the HIV issue a few years ago. You see this virus thing becoming that litigious?
Oh, definitely. I mean, they did, when this all, well, not when it all started, but shortly after it started, they did change, or they amended, or they added to the Family Medical Leave Act to try to address this situation, providing that employees, who were positive, who had to go in quarantine, you couldn't terminate them. You had to give them, 14 days to there. There were certain paid sick leave that you had to give those employees. So there have been some accommodations made. Also, if an employee has to take care of someone or has a child in school and needs to do some care for that, because of the school closures. So there is some protection and some paid sick leave guarantees. I did have the details actually a few weeks ago, but I haven't had to look at it in the last few weeks. But so yes, there are issues that has impacted on the employees with the COVID. I will definitely think there will be litigation arising out of this situation, whether it's related to terminations or leave or sick leave, paid sick leave. Were they entitled to it? Were they not entitled to it? And there are some privilege issues. I mean, you can't divulge medical records. So, obviously, if someone has the virus and they're positive, I think the association needs to advise. I guess you can figure out which one's positive or not, right? But I think the other employee, if they're working in close contact, and I haven't had this come up yet, so but the other employees need to know, so they need to self quarantine themselves. And again, I think in the aftermath of all this, we are going to see a lot of stuff going on. Administratively, courts, whatever, because it is so new, and the law is trying to catch up.
And and Peter, and I think that we're going to see it. I think associations are going to be a target coming up. I think that depending upon what an association did relative to closing their pool, closing their their gym, closing some of those things, I can see a tremendous amount of cases coming out where people are going to argue that their family member or somebody contracted the coronavirus at some association pool, or because the association didn't adequately sanitize, didn't adequately protect, didn't adequately restrict, and so there's going to be
I agree, which is why I've been advising my clients pretty much down the line, shut down. Close your common areas, close your pools, close this, close that, because I'd rather face, I think I said this on the air before, I'd rather face a lawsuit later about, well, you inconvenienced me because I couldn't swim or whatever, as opposed to someone else saying, well, there was a death or illness or the virus spread through the community because you didn't do this and that and the other. Because in a lot of associations, there's some of the boards are getting a lot of pushback or pressure from owners, residents who want these things open. Same thing with the visitation. Asserting that you can't keep my visitors out. This isn't right. Again, I've been err on the side of, in light of the seriousness of this, of this virus or the potential seriousness of it, err on the side of the closure. Now, again, I think you're right. I think you are going to see some litigation arising later. As you said, hopefully, again, you don't want to see people getting sick or die, but
and I think that as a board, I think as a board member or a board and as a property manager, don't create responsibility. In other words, if your board is going to vote to close down their facilities, in accordance with the direction of the governor and in terms of limiting sizes of people or in places where people can congregate in excess of 10. Well, first of all, you may want to look at that. If you're an association of 15, it may or may not be an issue, but if you're an association of 100, but I wouldn't take responsibility for padlocking the facility or going to some extent beyond what you normally have, because now you may take on additional responsibility. If you've posted signs, you've told people the place is closed, you need to observe the health requirements and act accordingly. But now if you take on additional responsibility of making sure it's locked, of making sure that somebody's not in there, of policing it, you now may take on an additional responsibility that you didn't have before, which then could come back to bite you. So, I would say,
yeah, but I'm not, Mark. I'm not sure that I agree that to me, but you can also, but that argument cuts both ways, because I don't think by locking it, you're now telling people that you're ensuring their safety. Okay, you're just taking in action that you deem prudent. Now, obviously, you should not make any statement that everyone's going to be okay now because we closed the pool, or everyone's going to be okay now because we closed the beach, or we closed the clubhouse. But what I'm concerned about is, you seem to be thinking that, all right, if we do that, now we're taking on this added responsibility. I think it's worse. Again, we can agree to disagree, to perhaps do nothing, okay, and leave it up to the owners. You can tell the owners, look, social distance for yourselves, okay? Don't sit together, right? But if you see out there, and that owners are not, complying, they're not social distancing, they're hanging out together at the pool, and they're doing everything that they were doing before, and yet you did nothing.
No, I'm not saying you do nothing. No, I'm not saying you. I think you go out there and you say, this pool, the facility's closed. We're limited. It's not open for free activities and all of that kind of thing. And I think you post the signs with wording on it that specifically says exactly what you're supposed to do, what the health department says you're supposed to do, and those kind of things, so that all of that's been posted. And I'm not saying you don't take any action. What I'm saying is you don't take any action beyond what you normally would. So you don't post somebody out there
but
to
you have
check to make sure it's locked.
But Mark, when you say what you normally would, what does that mean?
Well, like, for example,
this is not normal. The whole situation's not normal.
No,
I'm just not sure what you mean by that.
What I'm talking about is taking on additional responsibility to make sure the pool is closed. In other words, I'm not going to post somebody out there or make sure it's locked every night, because I don't. I think if I take,
but I know of situations. But we're going to have this. You're going to have this discussion. But I know of situations where they put the sign up and the owners just push the sign away, and they just go in anyway.
Right. So you take.
And I know it happens.
So you take action on that point. So they've ignored the rules, and you take action just like you would normally. If somebody's using your clubhouse that's not authorized, you'd go in there and say you have to leave. I'm not saying don't do anything. What I'm saying is don't do anything beyond what you would normally have done. In other words, if you would normally lock the pool every night, lock the pool every night. But if you normally just make sure the lights are off and everything, and and the gate's shut and all of that kind of thing, or during the day, if you normally have that open so that people can go through there to do maintenance or go wherever they're going, then don't lock it out and have a procedure that they have to go somewhere and get somebody, and somebody has to monitor it, because then if that doesn't happen, because you took on that addition. But I
guess we're going to agree to disagree.
Okay.
Well,
because I think every place now is doing things they don't normally do because of this emergency. Okay, grocery stores have these arrows by which aisle you're supposed to go into. They have plexiglass shields up. They have lines where you're supposed to stand. They're not doing what they normally do. Okay.
Right.
So, are you telling me that if I get sick now at Publix, that because they put these lines in, and I thought I was safe, I can sue Publix now?
I would say so, yeah.
And wait. And they should have done nothing. They should have just done what they normally do.
No, I think
these are not normal. These are not normal times. So I don't think. I don't think putting a padlock on the pool. Okay, I mean, I could be wrong on this. I've been wrong plenty in my life. Okay,
I never
but
have.
but I have. I know. Well, you're smarter than me. So I agree that they shouldn't give any kind of assurance to people that now they're safe. That'd be the worst thing to do.
That's what I'm
okay. You don't want to give an assurance to someone that don't worry, now you're safe. But I don't want them. I think they should take reasonable measures. I'll just leave it at that.
Jim, what you had a comment? Go ahead.
Well, there was certainly an exciting conversation, and illustrates, I think, for your listeners who come from different size condominium associations, I'm sure, what we're all going through and on a board. Now, our board took the step that, Peter, you have proffered some time ago, and we felt the wrath of our unit owners. They wanted to sue us, and one of them asked who the name of our association attorney was. I said, well, good luck with all of that, because we feel, or at least I feel as a member of the board, that we've taken the steps and we can provide a very good defense by showing the documented defense, by showing the steps we've taken along the lines you've recommended. I would add to this discussion that I also checked our insurance, our association insurance.
Oh, good.
And it has the pollution and exclusion in it, and also our D&O insurance has in it an exclusion for microbes. And when I checked the definition carefully of microbes, microorganisms includes viruses. So I was able to point out to my fellow board members that not only is our general liability insurance probably never going to cover or respond to one of those lawsuits, Peter, that you hypothetically talked about, but that we as individual board members, if we were sued, would not have any coverage under the D&O coverage either. So I throw that out there for the benefit of your listeners, hoping that I'm accurate in my memory and reporting on what I found out.
No, I think there are a lot of exclusions. I think some policies even have a pandemic exclusion in it, expressly, and I definitely they're going to have it after this. Okay,
Yeah.
Just like after 9/11. I mean, when things happen, everything reacts, right? So after 9/11, what did we see? Terrorism exclusions everywhere. Okay,
right.
Acts of terrorism were excluded from everything. So if they're not in the policies now, and they probably are, like that microbe exclusion you were just mentioning, and some say pandemics themselves, but we're definitely going to see it after this, this is. I really pray that obviously that no one gets sick and dies, but obviously that's wishful thinking because. But as far as an association being held liable, anyone can sue anyone at any time. That's what America's like, for better or for worse. I still think it may be somewhat difficult, in a court of law, and we'll see how it turns out. Being able to prove that the infection occurred due to a lapse of an association in some manner or form. The cause and effect, but we all know, suits are suits and they're unpredictable, juries are unpredictable, and so we'll see.
One final piece to this question about executive session. Under the legal that we've just been discussing, would it be possible to discuss a legal opinion, or do we still have to have the attorney at least on the phone with regard to a potential lawsuit or a threatened lawsuit?
You mean for a closed meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, for a closed meeting, the lawyer needs to be participating
by phone.
It's not. You can't close it just to discuss the lawyer's opinion. Okay.
Okay.
He or she needs to be participating in that meeting to discuss the opinion.
Okay, that's fine. But he or she can participate in person or by phone, right?
Yes.
Okay. And there has to be some general connection to a lawsuit or threatened lawsuit or potential lawsuit. Now,
threatened, pending.
This situation would be a good example. You could do this in executive session, I think, because there is the potential for lawsuits on this. So,
right, you're talking about how to exactly.
Right, how to prevent it. But on other issues, you can't just. I've seen some associations, just try to get their attorney involved so that they can close it off and talk about a matter that they don't want the public to know. That's a different story, And if there's no litigation that's involved in that, or potential litigation that's involved in that, then you can't go into executive session for that. But
Got it.
But I think like you're talking about, Jim, I think that would certainly in this kind of thing. But and then to have the attorney on the line makes that more appropriate.
Well, as always, I appreciate your these discussions, and especially in today's environment. And I'll sign off in case you have anybody else waiting in line.
All right.
Well, stay safe. Thank
Thanks,
you for
Jim.
calling.
Take it easy.
Bye now. Thank you.
Yep. So, what I was getting at, Peter, and I think, I'm probably erring on the side of caution here, believe it or not, is that I'm really concerned about the lawsuits that are already coming and are going to come up. We've got a lot of personal injury attorneys that aren't suing for auto accidents right now or anything else, and there's going to become personal injury attorneys that become COVID attorneys. This is going to be their specialty. They're going to make a fortune the rest of their life, basically on this situation. Right. So, large companies and others are a good target. Now, one thing that Jim said that is really a good thing is that with no insurance, these attorneys won't be interested. Frankly, it's just the way it works. If they're not going to get paid from an insurance company, and they're going to have to figure out how to get assets, and in an association where many of these units are primary residences and homesteaded, there's no way they're going to get, there's no way they're going to get to some of this stuff. It will dampen that going after associations just because of that.
Well, unfortunately, by law, though, in an association, you're right. They still have a collectability issue.
Yes.
But theoretically, every owner is liable up to the value of their unit if the insurance proceeds are insufficient to cover a claim. So
yeah,
there isn't. Now, I do want to say one thing, and I'm not trying to, backpedal at all here, but I do encourage everyone listening, especially board members, check with your own counsel. I'm just one person, okay? There are different opinions on this, on everything. So, what I say, what Mark says, it's not the gospel. Please, please, please check with your own attorneys, check with your own counsel, and get some assistance if you need it.
Yeah, because I do. I mean, and each situation is a little bit different. And I know, with some of the things that my son's got going on, and not just his associations, but adjacent associations and things like that, they all have different stuff. For example, some of these facilities,
and also each, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but every county and every city now seems to be different.
Right.
So you got to comply with their orders.
Right. In
Palm Beach County, in Broward, and I believe also down in Miami-Dade County, there are governmental orders. Shut your pools, shut your beaches. And, I know my clients have, or their neighbors have had officers come by and say, get this beach closed or we're going to start issuing citations. So you do have to be cognizant of, and it's difficult now because there's so many different orders from the governor on down to, to the mayors, and the, town and city councils and commissions. And it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle because, certain places are this, other places, now we have the beaches open where in Jacksonville, right? They just, I think, opened up, over the weekend, at least for sometimes during the day. So you do have to be aware of your local jurisdiction and what they're doing there too.
Yeah, and there's issues, of course, that are being litigated right now, or starting to be litigated, as to whether or not the governors and the county commissioners and the city
have the authority,
even have the authority to do that, to close private property. So it's all going to be litigated after the fact. There's going to be questions and there's going to be activity. Mm-hmm. So there's no question about that. But what I was getting at is you do have a lot of different situations with, like, I've got an association. I've got an association that has access to, they have boat docks, right? and they can actually go out. There's not a restriction on them being on the water, coming from a private boat dock. So they need to get access to the boat docks, but that's through another facility. So and there's a different association there. So you've got all these issues that you got to deal with in terms of restrictions for other people's access and other associations' access. We have a lot of associations that, to some degree, share common property out on the beach. Out here in Hutchinson Island, a lot of associations were built originally sharing sharing some recreational facilities. So, like with Ed Koch's facility years ago, when Ed was on with us, he had a situation like that where they shared common pools, common gym. Now who makes the decision? What if one association says we're closed and the other association says, no, we're not? Well, now you got to get the association that is, that it controls the recreational facilities, which may be a completely different association, to deal with that. So it is there's a lot of these kind of things that are going to come up, and it's not going to be easy, but I am concerned that we are going to get targeted. There is an exempt, most policies don't have insurance coverage, although there's been talk about making the insurance companies cover some of this, but I don't see how they can do that if the insurance companies have specifically exempted out of it and had already had something in their policy. But because almost always acts of war, force majeure, all of those kind of things are excluded. So we're probably looking at not having coverage for some of this stuff. So all I'm saying is that I don't think that I don't, as an association, I think you need to take action under what's been recommended by your municipality or whatever else, but don't get too condo commando is what I guess I'm getting. Don't get too driven about enforcement that somebody can say that if you didn't, that now you're liable. Well, you guys took on the responsibility of people didn't sneak in at night and get in there and use it. Now I got it because I was one that snuck in there and you didn't keep the other ones out. So there is going to be some of that, they won't get it, but they'll get it from the people who snuck in there and got it. So, and this, I think the other situation is this not being able to really disclose because of the health issues. I don't think this is the same as some of the other situations that occurred. When we had the swine flu and when AIDS epidemic and all of those kind of things, there was a much broader and a much higher level potentially of exposure and or death relative to some of those things than maybe we're seeing right now. And so, I'm not sure that, where do you trade off privacy? I don't just see where, if you've got somebody that's especially in an association, if you've got an outbreak of 2 or 3 or 4 people that have tested positive, I don't know how you keep that quiet. You know what I mean, Peter?
Well, I think you can basically, I don't have too much of an issue telling the owners, yeah, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever positive tests. I do have an issue saying who they are. Okay. I don't think that we can release the name unless the person voluntarily, without pressure.
Part of this thing is contact. You got to.
Oh, I understand it. Again, we're swimming in the uncharted waters, right? So, but it's still and someone could disagree, and that's fine. I understand that that people want to know who it is because they want to know whether they've been in contact, with that, with that person. But it's still my position, at least, that that not to divulge the name without the person's consent.
Yeah.
But I see the other side of it, but that's still my position.
Yeah, how do I decide to quarantine? How do I keep from infecting somebody else in my family? What if I've been doing a really good job and all of this, and I didn't realize that, that my next door neighbor was the one that, and I didn't actually see them, but I just happened to brush up against something that they had just recently touched or whatever, because there's a lot of contact. This one is not like some of the ones in the past where you have to have, kind of a transfer of fluids. This is one.
No, that's the problem with this one, right?
Yeah.
This one, I mean, this is so different than the HIV because of the transmission issue. The HIV doesn't transmit that easily. I mean, it's fluid to fluid. This one does, which is why everyone's terrified, right? And just locked in their homes basically because of the transmission and the relatively high fatality rate. So no, it's completely different. And so I don't know. At the end of the day, there's probably going to be litigation about that too. All right. Because you didn't disclose the name, or you did disclose the name. That's another issue that's probably going to end up in a courtroom.
And and it will. And so that's why I say, if that's why I'm cautioning associations, don't go too much beyond what the minimum is here. Don't create a level that you were responsible for something. If you don't take action where you deem it important to disclose something that you don't have that information on everybody, or that you can't disclose it on everybody, or that you may be creating, an additional liability of some kind. I just think that, the issue here is not to create liability, not to create a situation where, where we have an issue that maybe, we've created a situation for ourselves on that. And so, it's one of those kind of things where I think it's important, to be careful there. I also wanted to, and we got a caller, so I'll get to her in just 1 second, but I did want to make one comment too, Peter, and that's also why this is an issue, is, as you mentioned, the death rate is higher, but actually there's now statistics coming out that as a percentage of those people infected, it's not higher, it's actually lower. And a lot of the statisticians are starting to say that the numbers are really bad. We're really bad that we were making decisions on it, and the level is now turning out to be, and I know everybody's jumping on this, but it's actually turning out to be about the same as a bad flu season. So, that's going to come up to haunt us, because they're going to say we took action when we didn't. Anyway, it's going to be an issue.
Oh, wait. They were acting on the advice at the time.
Right.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is,
I might come back to haunt us economically. Okay, that maybe at the end of all this, if it's true that we overreacted, then the economic impact, but I don't think if people are currently following CDC and Fauci and all this, they're following those guidelines. Then they're doing what they're told to do. So
right. Connie, go ahead.
I have a comment and then I have a question. I'm in Florida right now, but actually I live in New York. And in the condo association that I live in New York, a couple got the coronavirus, and one of our friends passed away. His wife's still in the hospital after 3 weeks. It was important for people to know, because it is such a large community, to stay away. And people were wondering, why he died all of a sudden and why she's still in the hospital. So it was a matter of protecting all the, everyone else in that condo area, to just not go in the backyard, not touch, the furniture. And I think that's important, that people do know who it is. It's not a mark on them. They just were unfortunate to get that virus. So that was my statement.
No,
I understand.
And I think that I think that that's going to be the argument of many associations that disclose, is that they have an obligation to the other residents to let them know that they need to have some, because that, frankly, you can't get tested still. You can't get tested unless you've had contact with somebody who's had it. So, half the people are going untested that have had it already because you can't get tested. No matter if you have the symptoms or not, you cannot get a test. Now, maybe that will change coming up here, but you can't. So, and I understand what you're saying there, Connie. The flip side of that is, it is a situation where you have, you've basically put somebody's name out there as a potential. You're thinking of them as a victim, and it's that they've gotten it, and that but other people, including attorneys, are going to look at the opportunity to sue somebody, and and so that's going to be kind of out there as well. And okay, now here's somebody that had it. So let's say this other couple didn't take the precautions they were supposed to take. Maybe they went out and infected other people, not knowing that they had it, or maybe they traveled to Florida and back, or whatever. So now, boom, all of a sudden, they're potentially going to be a victim of a lawsuit, or their family is, as a result of some of the actions they've taken. The other thing that I think is interesting with this as well is that as numbers are being released, there becomes this situation that they're finding that more and more people are dying from comorbidities, multiple types of issues. So the fact that the person had the coronavirus, they may also have had diabetes, they may have also had some other issue, which can in itself be an issue, disclosing some of those things, COPD or whatever the deal is. And so now all of a sudden you've kind of opened that up. And there's not a right answer. I mean, I think your association, Connie, probably, because we're in a communal living.
Personally, for myself, I said, I'm not there now, I'm here. But for everyone who lives there, and there are 701 individual homes, it was important not only to rally by the family, but just to know that it could happen. It did happen, and everybody has to be even that much more careful about food being brought in, or people going out, to shop. I mean, it was just a wake-up call. It can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And no one's fault.
And this is why I think associations are having to deal with a whole different level of things than the rest of the world. I mean, it's one thing if you've got your house and it's a single family home by itself, and you got a pool, and all of those kind of things. You can regulate who comes in and out of your house pretty easily. You can restrict it to family, those kind of things. But here we have communal living, and also what happens as part of communal living, and a reason that a lot of people, especially older people, choose to live in condos here and up north, is that it's not an assisted living facility, but you kind of have neighbors that look out for you. Well, now all of a sudden, if I have the coronavirus and I'm 85 years old and I'm by myself in my unit, are people still going to check on me? And and what's going to happen as a result of that? I mean, there's a lot of unintended consequences that are going to occur as a result of this. And I'm not saying those will result in lawsuits, but I'm just saying there's going to be some unintended consequences. People who maybe shouldn't have died that are going to die because they ended up being quarantined, and maybe they came down with something that was just, for example, I've got an employee that is going to die probably as a result of not the coronavirus itself. He's got cancer, but he couldn't get in to get tested because he didn't realize he had cancer, and now it's lymphoma, and he's pretty sure that they're going to try, but he probably didn't get treatment soon enough. So there's going to be a lot of those kind of stories that a person was scheduled to have their colonoscopy and didn't, and those type of things. There's going to be issues, especially with elderly, that somebody fell or somebody something happened, and normally the next door neighbor would have come over and said, how you doing? But they're not. So it's a bad thing from that standpoint. It's not just the effect of the virus itself. It's the ancillary impact on community associations in particular, because they're communities, they're family, and that whole thing. And
You lawyers are going to be kept very busy. Can I ask another question?
sure, go ahead. We got about 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. Who has the right to change our documents?
That depends upon your documents.
We're a condo. Who can change our documents?
Under most documents, it takes a vote of the membership, and the percentage of approval would be in each document. Each document has its own amendment provision, so you have to look at your documents.
Okay.
Yeah, that's and then we can deal with that again, Connie. If you've got other follow-up questions on that, you can call us next week, and we'll be glad to follow up on that, because that is true, and it may be a case now that circumstance has changed during this right now, during the coronavirus and what's going on there. There may be some temporary provisions that can be done. But we'll talk about that and the limitations next week on the show. Thanks for the calls. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you being with us right here on WST Digital 1450. We're Martin County's Heritage Station.